June 2, 1942. Midway Atoll. The heat on the tarmac was enough to melt rubber. It rose in shimmering waves, distorting the horizon where the blue of the Pacific met the blinding white of the sky. Ensign Jack Rusty Miller stood under the wing of his TBD Devastator, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that was already black. He looked up at the plane. It was a beast, not a sleek, predatory shark like the new Wildcats. It was a whale, a corrugated metal tub with wings as thick as barn doors and a top speed that a good tailwind could beat. "She's leaking oil again, sir," the mechanic, Chief O'Malley, said, emerging from under the engine cowling. He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the coral runway. "Gasket on cylinder 3 is shot. I patched it with gum and prayer, but she'll bleed if you push her past 150 knots. If I push her past 150 knots, Chief, the wings will fall off anyway," Jack replied dryly. He patted the fuselage. The metal was hot to the touch. The TBD Devastator, the Navy's primary torpedo bomber. In 1937, it had been a marvel of modern engineering. Now, in 1942, it was a joke. The Japanese Zeros could fly circles around it. The anti-aircraft gunners on the Imperial ships called them sitting ducks. The American pilots had a different name: flying coffins. "Hey, Miller." Jack turned. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron was walking across the tarmac. He was a hard man, part Sioux Indian, with eyes that saw everything and forgave nothing. He commanded Torpedo Squadron 8, VT-8. "Sir." Jack straightened up. "Briefing in 10, Waldron barked. "And get that oil cleaned up. I don't want you leaving a trail for the Japs to follow back to the carrier." "Yes, sir." "Sir? Is it true?" Waldron stopped. He looked at Jack. "Is what true, Ensign?" "The intelligence reports that the entire Kido Butai is out there. For carriers. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu." Waldron's face didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "If they are out there, Miller, then we have a job to do. We put a torpedo in their gut before they put a bomb on our flight deck. That's the only truth that matters." He walked away. Jack looked back at his plane. "Number T-16. Did you hear that, old girl?" he whispered. "We're going hunting. The card game." That night, the USS Hornet was a floating city of steel and tension. The lights were red for combat conditions. The air smelled of aviation fuel, sweat, and fear. In the ready room, the pilots of VT-8 were playing poker. They weren't playing for money. Money was useless where they were going. They were playing for cigarettes, chocolate bars, and promises. "I raise you my lucky Zippo," Tex, a lanky pilot from Dallas, said, tossing a silver lighter onto the table. "Against your leave pass in Pearl." "You're bluffing, Tex," Jack said, looking at his cards. "Pair of 8s. Dead man's hand. Try me." The door opened. The chatter died instantly. Commander Waldron entered. He walked to the front of the room where a large chalkboard hung. He picked up a piece of chalk. He drew a circle. Inside he wrote, "Midway." Then, to the northwest, he drew 4 X's. "We found them," Waldron said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to the back of the room. "PBY Catalina spotted the fleet at 0900 hours today. They are heading for the atoll." A murmur went through the room. This was it. The big one. "We launch at dawn," Waldron continued. "The dive bombers and the fighters will go high. We will go low. We go in at wavetop level. We drop our fish, and we get the hell out." He paused. He looked at the faces of his men. Some were barely 20 years old. "I won't lie to you," Waldron said. "The Devastator is slow. The Zero is fast. The Japanese screen will be heavy. But remember this: a torpedo plane is the only weapon in this fleet that can sink a battleship with one hit. You are the hammer. The rest, they are just the noise." He looked directly at Jack. "Miller, you're on my wing. Don't drift." "No, sir." "Get some sleep. Write your letters." Dismissed. The room emptied slowly. Jack stayed behind. He pulled a piece of paper from his flight jacket. He uncapped his pen. "Dear Mom, if you're reading this, then the rusty bird didn't make it back to the nest. Don't cry. I was doing what I had to do. The guys here are good men. We're gonna stop them, Mom. We're going to make sure they never get near California. He couldn't finish it. He folded the paper and shoved it into his locker. He climbed into his bunk. He closed his eyes, but all he could see were the 4 X's on the chalkboard. June 4th, 1942. 7 o'clock hours. The launch. The flight deck of the Hornet was a chaotic ballet. Propellers spun, coughing blue smoke. Yellow shirt deck crews signaled frantically. The wind whipped the ocean into whitecaps. Start engines. The command roared over the loudspeakers. Jack pressed the starter. The Pratt & Whitney engine of T-16 sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life. The whole plane shook. It vibrated like a washing machine full of bricks. Jack checked his gauges. Oil pressure was low. Cylinder head temperature was high. She's running hot, sir. His rear gunner, Petty Officer Tom Smitty Smith, shouted over the intercom. Smitty was a kid from Brooklyn with a twin .30 caliber machine gun and a picture of Rita Hayworth taped to his ammo box. She likes it hot, Smitty. Jack lied. Check your guns. Rat-tat-tat. A short burst. Guns clear. The deck officer signaled. Waldron's plane rolled forward. He gave a thumbs up as he passed Jack. Then it was Jack's turn. He released the brakes. The Devastator lurched forward. He pushed the throttle to the firewall. The engine screamed. The plane gathered speed. Felt heavy, sluggish. The torpedo under its belly weighed 2,000 pounds. It was like trying to fly a dump truck. The end of the deck rushed toward him. He wasn't going fast enough. Come on, you pig, Jack yelled. Fly! He pulled back on the stick. The wheels left the deck. The plane dipped, the propeller spray kicking up water from the ocean surface, and then, slowly, agonizingly, it clawed its way into the air. They formed up, 15 Devastators, 15 Coffins heading into the heart of the Japanese Empire. The long flight to nowhere. They flew for an hour. The ocean was an endless expanse of empty blue. Radio silence was strictly enforced, but Jack could hear the static hissing in his headset. Something was wrong. The coordinates given in the briefing. The Japanese weren't there. Waldron broke radio silence. Stanhope, you see anything? Negative, Skipper. Just water. They were burning fuel. The Devastator had a short range. If they didn't find the fleet soon, they would have to ditch in the ocean. They turned, Waldron said. It wasn't a question. It was an intuition. They turned north. Skipper, the orders said southwest. Another pilot argued. To hell with the orders, Waldron snapped. I know where they are. Follow me. He banked his plane to the right, north. It was a gamble.
A suicide gamble.
If he was wrong, they would run out of gas and die for nothing. If he was right, they would find the entire Japanese Navy waiting for them. Jack followed. He watched his fuel gauge. The needle was dropping. We're at 40%, sir, Smitty said nervously. If we go much further, we're swimming home. Keep your eyes open, Smitty, Jack said. Look for smoke. 10 minutes passed. 20. Then Smitty screamed. Smoke.
10 o'clock.
Horizon. Jack looked. There, on the edge of the world, were black smudges against the sky. Ships, dozens of them. And in the center, massive flat-topped behemoths. The carriers. Target sighted. Waldron's voice crackled. Attack formation. Low and slow, boys. Line abreast. But as they descended toward the water, Jack looked up. High above the Japanese fleet, swarms of black dots were circling like flies. Zeros, Jack whispered. Hundreds of them. And they had no fighter cover. The American Wildcats had lost them in the clouds. Torpedo Squadron 8 was alone. The slaughter. Here they come, Smitty screamed. The sky fell on them. The Zeros didn't just attack. They swarmed. They dove from the sun, their cannons tearing the air apart. The first Devastator to die was Ensign Gaylord's. Jack watched in horror as the plane next to him simply disintegrated. The fuel tank exploded, turning the aircraft into a fireball that tumbled into the sea. Break! Break! It was chaos. The slow, lumbering torpedo bombers tried to evade, but they were like cows trying to outrun cheetahs. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Bullets hammered Jack's fuselage. "I'm hit," Smitty yelled. "My gun is jammed. Fix it." Jack screamed, wrestling with the stick. "Get them off me." He banked hard left, barely missing a geyser of water from an anti-aircraft shell. The Japanese ships had opened up. The sky was filled with black puffs of flak. "Skipper is down." Jack looked forward. Waldron's plane was smoking. His left wing was on fire. "Go in, boys." Waldron's voice came over the radio, calm as if he were ordering coffee. "Get a hit." Then Waldron's plane stood on its nose and smashed into the ocean. Gone. Then another. And another. "There's too many of them," Tex's voice screamed. "I can't shake." Static. Jack looked around. There were supposed to be 15 planes. There were 3 left. Him. A plane piloted by George Gay. And one other. 3 coffins against the entire Keto Butai. "We have to drop," Jack yelled to himself. "We have to drop." The target was ahead. The Kaga. A massive aircraft carrier painted with a giant red sun on its flight deck. It looked like a floating island. Jack pushed the throttle. The engine was screaming, overheating, shaking the bolts loose. "Steady," he muttered. "Steady." He had to get within 1,000 yards. He had to fly straight and level. He had to be a perfect target. A zero swept across his nose. Jack saw the pilot's face. He saw the white scarf. Bullets shattered his canopy. Plexiglass sprayed into his face, cutting his cheek. "Smitty!" No answer. Jack turned his head. The rear cockpit was a mess of blood. Smitty was slumped over his gun. "Dead." "You bastards!" Jack wept. Tears mixed with the blood on his face. "You bastards!" He was alone. The last plane of VT-8. Gay had gone down. The other one was burning. Just Jack. The Kaga loomed large in his sights. He could see the sailors on the deck running. He could see the AA guns flashing. 800 yards. 700 yards. "Drop? Damn you, drop." He reached for the release lever. Boom! A shell hit his tail. The plane bucked violently. The rudder control cable snapped. The nose pitched up. The torpedo release jammed. "No!" Jack screamed. "No!" He was too high. He was off course. He had missed his chance. He banked away, the zeros chasing him like angry hornets. His plane was a sieve. Smoke was pouring into the cockpit. He had failed. Waldron was dead. Smitty was dead. Everyone was dead. And the Japanese carriers were untouched. Jack wrestled the dying bird down toward the water. He was going to crash. He knew it. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. He hit the water at 100 knots. The world turned white, then green, then black. The silence. Jack woke up choking. Salt water. He was underwater. The cockpit was filling fast. He fumbled with his harness. His fingers were numb. He kicked the canopy open. He dragged himself out. He floated to the surface, gasping for air. The ocean was calm. Debris floated around him. Oil slicks, pieces of wing, a helmet. He grabbed onto a floating seat cushion. He looked around. The battle was over. The sky was empty of American planes. But in the distance, the Japanese fleet was still there. Proud and scathed. They were turning into the wind, launching their own planes to finish off the American fleet. Jack floated in the water, a tiny speck in the vast Pacific. He felt a hollowness in his chest that was worse than fear. It was total, crushing defeat. He had flown the Coffin, and the Coffin had lived up to its name. But as he bobbed in the waves, watching the smoke rise from the horizon, Jack Miller didn't know one thing. He didn't know that his sacrifice wasn't in vain. He didn't know that because the Zeros had come down to sea level to slaughter the torpedo bombers. The sky above was now empty. He didn't know that high above, at 20,000 feet, 3 squadrons of SBD Dauntless dive bombers had just arrived. And they were looking down at the Japanese carriers, whose decks were full of fuel and bombs, with no fighter cover to protect them. Jack watched as the first black speck dove from the clouds. Then another. Then another. Give 'em hell, Jack whispered through cracked lips. The Coffin pilot had opened the door. Now the executioners were walking through. June 4th, 1942.
10:25 am.
The Pacific Ocean. From the water, the war looked different. It was silent, save for the lapping of waves against Jack's life vest. But above him, the sky was screaming. Jack watched, treading water, as the miracle unfolded. The SBD Dauntless dive bombers fell out of the clouds like silver hammers. They didn't miss. The Kaga, the carrier that Jack had failed to hit, erupted. It wasn't just an explosion. It was a disintegration. A bomb smashed through the flight deck, igniting the fully fueled planes and the piles of ordnance scattered below. A pillar of black and orange fire punched a hole in the sky. Then the Akagi. Then the Soryu. In 5 minutes, the heart of the Imperial Japanese Navy was ripped out. Jack wept. He floated in the oil and debris of his squadron, watching the bonfires of the enemy. It was a vindication, yes, but it was bitter. He was a spectator in his own war. A PBY Catalina flying boat spotted him 4 hours later. As they hauled him into the blister, wet and shivering, the pilot grinned at him. "You boys drew them down," the pilot shouted over the engine noise. "You low-level guys. You pulled all their zeros to the deck. The high-altitude bombers had a clear path. You sacrificed yourselves to open the door." Jack looked at his shaking hands. Bait, he thought. We were just bait. October 1943. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The Solomon Islands smelled of rotting vegetation, unwashed bodies, and malaria. Jack Miller was no longer an ensign. He was a lieutenant. He had a Purple Heart, a Silver Star, and a permanent tremor in his left hand that he hid by smoking constantly. He walked into the maintenance hangar of the Cactus Air Force. It wasn't really a hangar. It was a canvas tent propped up against a wall of sandbags. "What have we got, Chief?" Jack asked. Chief O'Malley, who had survived the Hornet's sinking and followed Jack to this hellhole, wiped his greasy forehead. "Junk, Lieutenant. Pure junk." O'Malley gestured to the tarmac. There, sitting in the mud, were 4 TBD Devastators. They were obsolete. The Navy had officially retired them after the slaughter at Midway, replacing them with the new, sleek TBF Avengers. But supply lines to Guadalcanal were strangled. The Avengers were going to the big carriers. The scrap Iron Squadron on the island got the leftovers. These planes were Frankenstein monsters, patched with soup cantin, engines held together with wire, paint peeling to reveal the primer. "The flying coffins ride again," Jack muttered, kicking a tire. "We got no torpedoes either," O'Malley said, spitting tobacco. "Supply ship got hit last night. We got 500-pound bombs, depth charges, and crates of whiskey. That's it." Jack looked at the bombs stacked in the corner. You can't sink a ship with a 500-pounder unless you drop it down the smokestack from high altitude. And these birds, he pointed to the Devastators, can't climb high enough with that payload. "Tell that to the Admiral," O'Malley grunted. The Tokyo Express. The briefing bunker was humid and crowded. Major Pappy Henderson, no relation to the field, slammed a swagger stick onto the map. "The Tokyo Express," Henderson said. "Every night, Japanese destroyers race down the slot. They shell our Marines, drop off troops and supplies, and race back before dawn." He pointed to a narrow strait. "Intel says a heavy convoy is coming through tonight. 3 Fubuki-class destroyers. Fast. Heavily armed. They're carrying reinforcements that will push us into the sea if they land. Send the PT boats," a Wildcat pilot suggested. "The PTs were chewed up last night," Henderson said grimly. "The destroyers have new radar. They spotted the boats and blew them out of the water before they could launch torpedoes." He looked around the room. "We need air support. We need to hit them before they reach the beach." "At night?" Jack asked. "In these planes. You're the only ones with a payload heavy enough to dent a destroyer, Miller," Henderson said. "The Wildcats only have machine guns. You have the bombs." "With all due respect, Major," Jack said, lighting a cigarette, "dropping a gravity bomb on a destroyer moving at 30 knots at night It's impossible. We'd have better luck throwing rocks at them. Find a way, Jack, Henderson said, his voice softening. Or start learning Japanese. The physics of desperation. Jack sat on the wing of his TBD, watching the sun set over the jungle. The flying coffin creaked in the cooling air. Find a way. He picked up a flat stone from the runway. He walked to a large puddle of rainwater. He threw the stone. It skipped. Plink, plink, plink. It skidded across the surface and hit a fuel drum on the other side with a hollow thud. Jack stared at the stone. He looked at the bomb rack under the plane. The problem with bombing ships was the angle. If you dropped from high up, the ship turned and you missed. If you dropped from low, the bomb would bury itself in the water and explode harmlessly, or the blast would take your own plane down. But what if the bomb didn't sink? Jack ran to the tent. Chief, get me a fuse. O'Malley looked up from his magazine. What kind? A delay fuse. 4 to 5 seconds. For a contact bomb? That's suicide. If you hit the target, it'll bounce off before it blows. Exactly, Jack said, his eyes feverish. It bounces. Like a stone. He grabbed a piece of chalk and drew on the dirt floor. If we come in fast, well, as fast as these tubs can go, and low. I mean deck low. 50 feet off the water. We release the bomb at 200 knots. It'll hit the water at a shallow angle, O'Malley reasoned. Right? And instead of sinking, surface tension makes it skip. Once, twice, 3 times. It slams into the side of the ship, right at the waterline. Or better yet, it hops over the rail and slams into the superstructure. And the delay fuse gives us 5 seconds to fly over the ship before the bomb goes off. So we don't blow our own tails off. O'Malley stared at the drawing. He scratched his chin. Masthead bombing, O'Malley whispered. The Army boys tried it with B-25s. But in a single-engine TBD, at night, under fire, it's the only way to hit a destroyer, Jack said. They can't dodge it. The bomb is coming at them horizontally. You'll have to fly straight down the throat of their AA guns, O'Malley warned. Jack, a destroyer has 20 anti-aircraft cannons. You'll be flying into a buzzsaw. This plane is already a coffin. Jack grinned. A cold, hard grin. Might as well make it a lethal one. The volunteers. Jack assembled his squadron. There were only 4 planes flyable. He looked at his pilots. Rains, a nervous kid from Ohio. Kowalski, a brute who flew by muscle memory. And Doc Holliday, a former stunt pilot who drank too much. Here's the plan, Jack said, explaining the skip bombing technique. Silence. You want us to play skipstone with 500-pound bombs? Rains asked, his voice squeaking. Against destroyers? It's that or let the Marines die, Jack said. And we're stripping the planes. Stripping them? Everything goes, Jack said. Rear guns, armor plating, radios, even the seat cushions. I want these planes light. We need every knot of speed we can get. If we're heavy, we won't skip. We'll splash. No rear guns. Kowalski frowned. So if a Zero gets on our tail? If a Zero gets on our tail at 50 feet above the water at night, he'll crash trying to aim, Jack said. We don't need defense. We need speed. They spent the afternoon tearing the planes apart. They ripped out the heavy radio equipment. They unbolted the rear machine gun turrets. They removed the armor plates from behind the pilot seats. The TBDs looked skeletal. Naked, O'Malley rigged the bombs. He set the fuses manually. 5 seconds, Jack, O'Malley said, patting the bomb under Jack's fuselage. Count them. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. If you're too close when it blows, you're dust. 2,300 hours. The launch. The night was black. No moon. Just the phosphorescent glow of the ocean and the distant flashes of lightning. 4 stripped-down Devastators idled on the mud strip. Jack pulled on his helmet. He felt exposed without the armor plating behind his back. He felt light. Good hunting, skipper, O'Malley yelled over the prop wash. Jack throttled up. The lighter plane leaped forward. Felt different. Responsive. For the first time, The Coffin felt like it wanted to fly. They lifted off into the darkness, turning north toward the slot. The trap. They flew at 100 feet. The altimeter was useless at this altitude. They flew by watching the whitecaps of the waves rush by in the darkness. Target area approaching, Jack whispered to himself. Radio silence was absolute. Then they saw them. 3 dark shapes cutting through the water. No lights, just the massive wake churned up by their propellers. The Japanese destroyers, Emigiri, Ujiri, and Akabano, the wolves of the ocean. They were moving in a line formation, fast, heading straight for Guadalcanal. Jack clicked his mic, breaking silence. Skipper to Wolfpack. Attack formation. Line abreast. Pick your target. I've got the lead ship. 2 on the center, Kowalski said. 3 on the rear, Doc said. 4. I'm with you, Skipper, Rains stammered. Drop altitude, Jack ordered. Get down on the deck. I want to see the rivets on their hull. They dove. 100 feet. 50 feet. They were skimming the water. The prop wash kicked up spray behind them. The destroyers hadn't seen them yet. The noise of the ship's own engines masked the sound of the approaching planes. Hold fire, Jack breathed. Hold. He lined up the silhouette of the lead destroyer in his iron sight. It was growing bigger, a massive wall of steel rushing toward him. Suddenly, a searchlight snapped on. A blinding beam of white light hit Jack's cockpit. They see us. Break cover, Jack yelled. The destroyers erupted. It wasn't just gunfire. It was a wall of lead. Tracer rounds, green and yellow, filled the air like angry fireflies. The water around them boiled with shrapnel. Jack didn't flinch. He couldn't. To skip the bomb, he had to fly perfectly level, straight into the light. Come on, Jack screamed, his knuckles white on the stick. Come on. Bullets pinged off his engine cowling. One shattered his instrument panel. Glass flew. He was 500 yards out. For 100 yards, the destroyer loomed like a mountain. He could see the gunners on the deck frantically cranking their cannons down. Too low for them, Jack realized. We're under their gun depression. The AA guns were designed to shoot up. Jack was coming in so low that the guns couldn't aim down far enough without hitting their own railing. He was in the blind spot. 300 yards. Now! Jack yanked the manual release lever. The plane bucked upward, relieved of the weight. Jack pulled back hard on the stick, banking violently to the right to clear the ship's mast. He looked back over his shoulder. The bomb hit the water. Sheep! It bounced 10 feet into the air. Sheep! It bounced again, clearing the waves. Slam! It smashed into the side of the destroyer right amidships, just above the waterline. It didn't explode instantly. It punched through the thin steel plating of the hull like a cannonball. Jack counted. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. 3. He saw the ship receding in the darkness. 4. 5. Boom! The ocean turned white. The center of the destroyer lifted out of the water. The flash illuminated the night like a lightning strike. The bomb had detonated deep inside the engine room/boiler room complex. The ship broke its back. The bow and the stern snapped upward like a broken toy. Direct hit, Jack screamed. Scratch one. But the celebration was short-lived. Mayday! Mayday! It was Rains. I'm hit. Fire. I can't. A fireball erupted on the water to Jack's left. Rains had flown straight into a wave of flak from the second destroyer. Focus! Jack yelled, swallowing the bile in his throat. Kowalski, Doc, get the others. Don't miss. Jack circled back. His plane was vibrating. He had shrapnel in his leg, he felt the warm wetness, but he didn't care. 1 destroyer was sinking, burning furiously. 2 were left, and now they were fully alert, turning their bows toward the planes to minimize their profile. Jack looked at his wing. He had 1 bomb left. They had rigged 2 under the wings for this suicide run, ignoring safety weight limits. I'm coming around, Jack growled. 1 down, 2 to go. The flying coffin roared. It wasn't a coffin anymore. It was a sledgehammer, and the night was only 4 minutes old. The slot, 23:04 hours. The ocean was burning. The lead destroyer, the Amagiri, was already gone. A broken spine of steel slipping beneath the black waves, hissing as the boilers met the sea. But the fight wasn't over. It had just started. Jack banked his stripped-down Devastator hard to the left, the G-force pressing him into his seat. His leg was throbbing where the shrapnel had hit him, a dull, hot ache that pulsed with his heartbeat. "Skipper, I've got the second one lined up." It was Kowalski. The big Polish pilot was diving on the Ujiri. "Wait for the angle, Ski." Jack screamed into his mask. "Don't drop until you see the whites of their eyes." The Ujiri was maneuvering wildly, cutting a zigzag pattern through the water to throw off the aim. But Kowalski was flying the Devastator like a fighter. He was low, so low his wheels were almost skimming the foam. Jack watched from above as Kowalski's plane disappeared into a storm of tracer fire. It looked like he was flying into a welding torch. "I'm taking heavy fire," Kowalski grunted. "Engine is coughing. I'm going in. Drop and pull up. Drop and pull up." Kowalski didn't pull up. Not yet. He held the line. He flew straight through the curtain of lead. Jack saw the bomb detach. One skip. Two skips. The bomb slammed into the Ujiri's stern, right near the depth charge racks. Kaboom! The explosion was different this time. It wasn't the dull thud of a hull breach. It was a chain reaction. The bomb detonated the destroyer's own depth charges. The entire back half of the ship evaporated in a blinding flash of white phosphorus and high explosives. The shockwave hit Jack's plane, rattling his teeth. "Yeehaw!" Kowalski screamed. "Did you see that? I blew his ass off." "Report status," Jack yelled. "I'm leaking oil bad, Skipper. Pressure dropping. I'm heading back to the barn." "Go," Jack said. "Doc, cover him." "Negative, Skipper." Doc Holliday's voice was calm, almost bored. "I've got the third one. He's turning into you. He's trying to ram you." The duel. Jack looked down. The third destroyer, the Akabano, wasn't running. It wasn't zigzagging. It had turned. Its sharp bow was cutting through the water, heading straight for the area where Jack was circling. The captain of this ship was smart. He knew that a broadside profile was a big target. By turning head-on, he presented the smallest possible target, a narrow wedge of steel. And it allowed him to bring all his forward guns to bear. "He wants a game of chicken," Jack whispered. He checked his wing. One bomb left. "Doc, flank him," Jack ordered. "Try to distract his gunners." "I'm on it." Doc's Devastator swooped down from the right, strafing the destroyer with his forward cowl gun. It was a pea shooter against a tank, but it worked. The destroyer's port side guns turned to track Doc. But the forward guns, the big 5-inch turrets and the dual 25mm autocannons, stayed locked on Jack. Jack pushed the stick forward. "Okay, you ugly bastard," Jack hissed. "Let's dance." He dove. The flying Coffin groaned. The airframe, weakened by the removal of the armor and the stress of the first run, shuddered violently. Rivets were popping. The wind whistled through the holes in the cockpit floor. He leveled off at 40 feet. He was flying straight down the throat of the destroyer. The Japanese captain ordered his main batteries to fire into the water in front of the plane. Boom! Boom! Massive geysers of water, 100 feet high, erupted in Jack's path. They were trying to create a wall of water to swat him out of the air like a fly. Jack yanked the stick left, then right, dodging the pillars of water. Salt spray coated his windshield. He couldn't see. "Wipers!" he screamed. But the wipers were broken. He wiped the glass with his gloved hand. The ship was rushing toward him. 30 knots closing speed plus 200 knots flight speed. It was happening too fast. If he dropped the bomb now, head-on, it wouldn't skip into the side. It would skip over the deck and splash harmlessly off the stern. Or worse, it would hit the sharp bow and deflect. He needed a side angle. But to get a side angle, he had to turn. And if he turned, he would expose his belly to every gun on the ship. "Trust the bird," Jack whispered. "Trust the rust." He held the head-on course. 300 yards. 200 yards. The tracer fire was blinding. Bullets tore through his right wing. A chunk of his rudder flew off. "Skipper, pull up!" Doc screamed over the radio. At 100 yards, Jack kicked the left rudder pedal hard and slammed the stick to the right. The Devastator skid-turned. It drifted sideways through the air, like a rally car drifting around a corner. For a split second, the plane was flying sideways relative to the ship, exposing the broadside of the aircraft but also lining up the bomb rack with the ship's bridge. It was a maneuver that shouldn't have been possible in a torpedo bomber. It was a fighter move. Jack slammed the release lever. The bomb dropped. The plane was so low that Jack could see the face of the Japanese officer on the bridge wing. He saw the white uniform. He saw the shock. Jack pulled back on the stick with both hands, screaming with effort. The Devastator cleared the ship's radio mast by inches. The antenna scraped the bottom of his fuselage with a screech of tearing metal. Behind him, the bomb didn't skip. It didn't have time. It was a direct throw. The 500-pound bomb, traveling at 180 knots, smashed directly into the glass of the destroyer's bridge. It punched through the window like a rock through a greenhouse. It didn't explode immediately. The delay fuse ticked. Tick, tick. The bomb sat in the middle of the command center, surrounded by the ship's officers. Tick. Jack was pulling away, inverted, struggling to right the plane.
Katrat.
The explosion blew the top of the superstructure off. The bridge disintegrated. The command center, the wheelhouse, the fire control systems, gone in a heartbeat. The Akabano didn't sink instantly, but it was decapitated. Without command, with its steering jammed, the massive ship veered wildly to port. It turned straight into the path of its own torpedoes that it had just launched in panic. Or perhaps it was just the magazine cooking off. A secondary explosion ripped the bow apart. The ship plowed into the water, its momentum driving it under the waves like a submarine. Jack leveled his plane. He looked back. 3 burning pyres on the water. 10 minutes. "Splash 3, Jack whispered. His voice was trembling. Splash 3. The long limp home. The flight back to Guadalcanal was a blur of pain. Jack's leg was numb. He was losing blood. The cockpit was swimming in and out of focus. "Skipper, you there?" Doc's voice. "Kowalski is down. He ditched near Savo Island. PT boats are picking him up. He's alive." "Good," Jack rasped. "Good. You're leaking fuel, Jack, and your tail is shredded. You gonna make it?" "This old Coffin hasn't buried me yet," Jack muttered. He saw the lights of Henderson Field. They had turned on the truck headlights to guide them in. "Gear down," Jack thought. He pulled the lever. Nothing happened. The hydraulics were shot. "No gear," Jack said. "Belly landing." He lined up with the mud strip. The ground rushed up to meet him. "Easy, easy." He cut the throttle. The Devastator hit the mud. Screech. The sound of metal tearing against the earth was deafening. The prop bent back. The plane slid for 100 yards, slewing sideways, throwing up a wall of mud and sparks. It came to a rest near the sandbags. Silence. Then, the hiss of steam from the shattered engine. Jack couldn't move. His hands were frozen to the stick. The canopy was ripped open from the outside. Strong hands grabbed him. "I got you, Skipper. I got you." It was O'Malley. They dragged him out of the wreck just as the fuel tanks ignited. The TBD number T-16 went up in a ball of flame behind them. Jack lay in the mud, looking up at the burning carcass of his plane. "She's gone, Chief," Jack whispered. "The bird is gone." O'Malley looked at the wreck, then at the sky, then at Jack. He had tears in his eyes. "She did her job, Jack. She did her job." Epilogue. The Rust and the Glory. November 1945. San Diego. The war was over. The world was rebuilding. Jack Miller sat in a diner, staring at a cup of black coffee. He walked with a cane now. The shrapnel in his leg still gave him trouble when it rained. He wasn't a hero in the newspapers. The headlines belonged to the carrier pilots, the aces, the men who flew the Hellcats and the Corsairs, the men who sank the Yamato. The skip bombing tactic became a standard maneuver later in the war, perfected by B-25 Mitchells. But few remembered where it started. Few remembered the desperate night in the slot with 4 stripped-down flying coffins. A young man in a Navy uniform walked into the diner. He noticed the pin on Jack's lapel, the Navy cross. The kid hesitated, then walked over. "Excuse me, sir," the kid said. "Did you fly?" Jack looked up. He saw the eagerness in the kid's eyes. "Yeah," Jack said softly. "I flew." "What did you fly? Mustangs? Corsairs?" Jack smiled. He thought of the TBD Devastator. He thought of the corrugated metal skin, the oil leaks, the way it shook like a dying animal, and the way it had carried him through the fire when nothing else could. "No," Jack said. "I flew a washing machine." The kid looked confused. "But let me tell you something, son," Jack said, leaning forward, his eyes flashing with the memory of burning destroyers. "That washing machine cleaned house." He finished his coffee, left $1 on the table, and walked out into the sunlight. The rusty bird was gone, buried in the mud of Guadalcanal, but the Coffin pilot was still walking. The end.